ready to rumble. Schilling Show Unleashed on the Seven Thunders Media Network. Former city councilor, husband, father, and community watchdog. Your host, Rob Schilling.
Welcome to the Schilling Show Unleashed Podcast. Remember, your direct support makes our show possible, and you can directly support this podcast by visiting shillingshow.com and then clicking on the Patreon banner at the top of the page to make a monthly contribution. We appreciate your support. The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast welcomes Grace Jo, a North Korean refugee, a U.S. citizen, the former vice president of NK in USA, and an advocate for people in North Korea who long for freedom. Today's topic is escaping from North Korea. It's a harrowing story. Grace Jo, thank you for joining us today on the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's my great pleasure.
In America, we are so unfamiliar with North Korea, and it's kind of shrouded in mystery to us. So let's go back to your childhood and growing up in North Korea. Who was leading the country at the time you were young, and what was it like? What are your earliest recollections about life in North Korea then?
I was born in 1991, and I escaped my country in 1998. At that time, the Kim Jong-il, the son of Kim Il-sung, he just became the leader in 1994. And I remember when we escaped in 1998, we had to vote for Kim Jong-il to become the supreme leader of the country.
What do you remember about your day-to-day existence? Did you go to school? I know you were rather young, but were you in school? And if so, what was it like being in school in North Korea?
Well, I was too young to go to public school at the time, but my sisters were. Since 1995 to 1997, my family were also facing the Great Famine at the time. So we moved it to the countryside. And since I can remember, we all lived in the mountain. And our daily routine begins with prepare our shoes and clothes to climb to the mountain to collect wild vegetables every day and bring it home and mix something with like a corn skin powder, boil it or steam it and trying to cook it, make a food for us. But most of the time, we don't have any rice or grains to mix with. And I also remember my sisters, they had to go to like a deeper mountain, collect like bags of wild vegetables, bring it home, steam it, and bring it to the street market, trying to exchange it with the other food. So those, like searching food was our daily routine. And I also remember I was 6.5 years old, and we also went to the millwork trying to collect the leftover powders from the millwork and trying to collect it and bring it home and make a porridge and eat it. But of course, so many people already done that. So not many good eatable powders left, but we also trying to make the raw corn skin into softer powder and trying to collect it, but it was even harder for adults to eat.
You mentioned moving to the country and this great famine that you reference. And again, I know you were very young, but how widespread was this in the country, and what brought it on? Was it simply a matter of bad weather, or were these policies of the government that brought famine on the people?
I didn't know at the time. I only remember it was hungry, cold, and frozen every day. But later I realized, and I kind of studied that along my memories, which is Great Famine began because the Kim Jong-il became the leader, and he completely stopped the government ration. And my mother still tell me that during the Kim Il-sung's time, he gave the ration to people, so we did have some type of food, at least like bags of potatoes per year. However, the Kim Jong-il's time, my father didn't get the ration and my mom didn't get the ration. So we had to be creative every day to searching for food. So the government policy about the ration completely changed at the time. I think because the Kim Jong-un completely closed to the trade and international connections at the time. So there's not many sources coming into North Korea. I think that's why government stopped giving out the food to the people. They only gave the food to the high elites and government officials and military at the time. So the regular workers like my father and my mother, they did not have chance to get them. And after many people, they didn't able to get the ration, we started to escape our country, look for the food, and try to do some private businesses. But because of the regulation and policies and travel ban and a lot of legal things kind of stopped them to do that in the beginning. So there are many people died by hunger, starvation, and disease, and also died on the way to find food in the border between China and North Korea by the guards.
This is a harrowing story, Grace, and it's so sad that people have to live like this. How widespread was this, to your knowledge now, in North Korea? Are there just a select few who are not dealing with this, or was this just a few people that were dealing with the starvation and the hunger?
Well, it's very unfortunate. I totally agree with your words. Like a few years ago, I thought I can retire from the public speaking and raising awareness and all that, because it's been about 15 years since I came to America, and it sounds like it's a little old story. So I thought I can retire. But recently I learned and I heard from other defectors and their family members that North Korea people are still suffering like before, like my family did. And people, they are calling current time as Great Famine, which is my family escaped during the famine. Between 1998 to 2005, they called them a Great Famine. And after 2005 to now, it became Great Famine, which means it's getting worse, never getting better. And many people, they are dying by hunger on the street. But of course, those officials will collect those bodies right away, so you will not able to see it during the day. And those business trade also, it's getting difficult, and defectors are not almost impossible to cross the border right now because it's super expensive and high security between both the borders, and it's very dangerous. Famine, dying, fear, hunger, all these complicated feelings are still continuing, and it's getting worse. That's the main reason I came back to human rights activist work again.
Is there any opportunity for people within North Korea to access information from outside of the country, or is it locked down pretty tight?
So there are two views we can look. First of all, of course, the government is keep searching for those people who are trying to get the information from outside of North Korea. So they are considering it as a very serious case. So once people find out, they will get punished by the government. However, people's curiosity never stops. So people will receive the foreign information through the CDs, DVDs, USBs, and radios, and tablets, smartphones, and televisions, and movies, and pop songs from South Korea. A lot of method we are sending to, and many people they love to watch those foreign movies and TV shows and TV series. For example, if South Korean drama showed in South Korea 2 days ago, then 2 days later, North Korean people, they can watch with the USBs. That's how fast they will get it. But of course, right now, a lot of people who were born after 1990s, I heard at least once they watched the Korean drama. So I think that's big change. And those North Korean people inside of North Korea, they are hungry for the information because they want to see what's the difference between their country and the other country. And the government is keep teaching them that South Korea is still poor and still worse than North Korea, and North Korea is still the best country in the world. So many people, after they watch those TVs and movies, they already know that that's a lie. So they tried to not trust the government's words anymore, but they trusted their choice. So the punishments, there's two categories. Now there are so many people already watched, so they cannot put everyone in the prison. So they only put prison those people who copied the DVDs or distributed the USBs, and whoever the leader of that activity, then they will put them in the political prison camp or kill them on a public execution as an example for certain times.
What happens inside of these prisons? I'm sure that the situation must be dire and that there's probably torture going on. Do you know when people are in prison there, what happens to them?
Yeah, thankfully, well, I shouldn't say thankfully, but I stayed in the Chinese prison for 13 months in Tumen area, and that prison only contains the North Korean defectors, and the timeline is between 3 days to 6 months maximum we stay. So I witnessed so many different defectors coming to our prison cell, and of course, during daytime, we don't have any activities to do, so the only thing was sharing stories from our lives. So I met about 3 ladies from political prison camp, and she shared about those daily routines with us. And once you go into political prison camp, their routine is work from the early dawn to late evening. For example, sunrise to sunset, and that's their activity because they don't have light in the prison. I mean, the artificial light. The workload is so severe, and the food that prison gives them is so minimal. So after 6 months or 8 months later, they will reduce the body weight from, for example, 65 kilogram to 30 kilogram right away, which means only skin covers on the bone. So it's like a walking skull in the farms. So those political prisoners, they are working in many different fields. And of course, the popular field they prefer to work is the government operated farms, because at least they can collect something on the farm. And I remember she told me that either you see grasshopper or frogs run in front of you, that those are the food for you and nutritious food that you can collect. So you have to catch them right away and peel off the skin, and then you just chew it right away. So I was asking like, oh, you are eating the raw frog, and is there any chance to cook it or something? And of course, that sounds so dumb question from me after I realized it was not the reality in there. She said, well, if you don't eat it right away, then someone will come and take it from you. So either it's live or it's raw, it's still delicious in your mouth because you are super hungry. So that's how terrible the condition is.
Was there, Grace Jo, any mercy shown by anyone inside the prison who was in a supervisory position? Did you find were there any kind people there?
I also met one lady who was a leader in the group, and of course she was she had an authority to hold the closet key, which is a very powerful position among the prisoners because she can eat and she has authority to distribute food for other prisoners. She told me that she has to show the authority tones and activity along the groups. Otherwise, she will get punished by the officers. Basically, if you are hungry, of course, people will getting aggressive and people will trying to fight for it. As a leadership position, they have to control those people. So I don't think we can see the kindness along those people.
The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast, we're talking with Grace Jo, a North Korean refugee and now U.S. citizen, on her harrowing story of escape from North Korea. We continue in just a moment.
Schilling Show Unleashed.
BorderHawk.news is a one-stop shop with the latest news about immigration, nationalism, and globalism. The BorderHawk staff daily curates immigration news stories and, in the fashion of the Drudge Report, updates the site with cutting-edge content and original first-class commentary. BorderHawk.news highlights national and international media reports, tweets, and nuggets buried in local news blurbs, polls, video clips, and policy research. BorderHawk is pro-legal immigration, pro-rule of law, but against an unsecure border, as countless Americans have suffered violence at the hands of criminal illegal aliens. And an increasing number of Americans are concerned about how mass migration affects their daily life. BorderHawk.news will remain on the forefront of the immigration issue with a buffet of info to read, evaluate, and share. Bookmark BorderHawk.news. Add them on social media at BorderHawkNews on Twitter.
Schilling Show Unleashed.
The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Our guest is Grace Jo, and we continue talking about her escape from North Korea. You lost family members, and this has got to be very painful for you, but I think it's important to tell the story of your brothers, your father, your older sister, whom you're not quite sure what happened to. Give us a background of your own family and the losses that you suffered, if you would.
I was born in kind of a middle-class family at the time, and my mother also told me that right before I was born, my family was living with a full of rice and oils and like a full of jar of oil and soy sauce and all that. But after I was born, about 2 years later, there are people trying to steal other people's food, and my family also stolen all the materials and food, and even silver spoons in the house got stolen for twice. And after that, my family had a debt. They were not able to recover from the stolen items. So she started to look for the food for her own. And my father, of course, he has to work for the government-operated factories and positions, so he was not able to find the food for his own, because in North Korea, workers have to attend their assigned work, otherwise they will get punished. So my mom has to travel in the cities and look for food and try to do some business in the home. So I remember she was steaming the buns in the house and trying to bring it to the village and change with other food. And I also remember she was sewing the gloves or hats and blazers in the house with hand. And I was the one who was holding the torch in the night because we don't have any lights. So in the next morning when we wake up, our nose were all dark and we all pointing each other and laughing each other. So that was my memory. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, those works, it didn't even solve the problem also, because I had 5 other siblings. Well, I was the 4th child, and under me there was 2 younger boys. So my mom and my dad, they had a total of 6 children. But right after I was born, it became 5, because before I was born, my older brother, he died by accident. So 5 children, 2 adults and 1 elderly in the house. A lot of people needed to eat, and our daily food was not enough to look for it. So I remember back in 1996, we were about 10 days, we were drinking cold water straight, and we didn't have any other food for months. The other memory I have was in the early dawn, there was a big mouse, like our clock didn't have enough battery, so the timer moves a little slow. So we bring it down and put the 45 angle. And then the mouse, when they crossing over that area, it just got caught there. So in the morning, we caught that mouse. My grandmother, she peeled the skin and cooked in the fire, and we all sharing little pieces per person. So I tried that mouse meat, and it was delicious. It had a lot of oils. Mm-hmm. It was really fat because it was keep eating the government-operated grains in the village. The other memory I have was in the spring season. My mom found 6 newborn mice under the stove, and then she ran to the house and told my grandmother, and my grandmother was so excited, and they collected those 6 newborn mice into their hands, and they were talking about how they want to cook it. They were talking about fry it, or dry it, or steam it, or boil it. They were talking about many different options, but they chose to boil it because it was a kind of early summer and a lot of flies around it. And after they boil in the stone pot, they had to choose which kid they want to choose to drink that. And because most of us were suffering from malnutrition, and we were barely walking at the time. And I remember my hair was straight and yellow and thin and sticks out, and combing or washing hands doesn't listen. And my belly was like really big, but my arms and legs were so skinny. So I was the lucky one. So I got picked, and I was given those mice soup, and that was the first time I had a mixed, like a half mixed corn and potato mixed rice with the soup. And because they consider it as medicine, you know, in the Korean culture, all the good things we have to give to father first and elder first, and then come to the youngest one. But at the time, they gave me the right bowl of rice with miso soup. That was a really precious memory I have at the time. And I was looking at them and kind of figuring out, like, oh, can I eat really these things without other siblings? And I was keep looking at them, and then my family, my mom and my dad was keep convincing me to eat that soup. So I did. After that, I think after about 2 or 3 weeks later, I slowly recovered from malnutrition. So I will say the little mice soup helped me to overcome the dying from malnutrition. So those are the memories. And my other daily routine was, like I mentioned earlier, we were going to the mountain and we were eating wild vegetables all day long. After we come back home at night, our tongues are green and our mouths were green because we are eating the grass all day long.
You eventually did escape, obviously and clearly, because we're having the conversation today. Would you tell us how this came to pass?
First escape was a little different because at the time we didn't have to bribe the border security. So my mom, she was holding me at her backpack, and she was holding my sister's hand, and 3 of us just swam across the Tumor River to China for the first time. However, the second time and third time and go on, it was getting harder because of the border security getting increased, and many soldiers, they were asking higher money. Last time when we got caught, of course, we got caught with the Pastor John Yoon. He still lives in Seattle, Washington, and he was rescuing about 12 North Korean defectors from China, and it was 2004, and he came to China with a Korean newspaper. It was mentioning that the George W. Bush signed the North Korean Human Rights Act, and that gives us an opportunity to come to America as legal refugees. So that gives us a hope, and my family decided to come to America instead of go to South Korea. So we decided to stay in China and helping the Pastor Yoon, and we joined the rescuing mission at the time. And first group we rescued, they are resettling in South Korea, and they're very successful right now. But the second group and third group, they were exposed to the undercover police officers in China, and they all came with them from Yanji, China to Qingdao and Inner Mongolia. So basically, at one day, we all got caught in 3 different places, and Pastor Yoon also got caught at the time, and that's how we stayed in Chinese prison for 13 months until the Pastor Yoon finished his final court. And of course, after we sent back North Korea, we committed a serious crime according to North Korean law. So we thought we're going to die after we crossed border to North Korea. But about a month later, the Pastor Yoon raised like 10,000 US dollars, and he bribed 6 different officials from North Korea through the brokers. Those officials allowed us to say whatever we can say, and then just documented it and made a regular case, and then released us from the prison. And then we went back to our hometown, and we escaped again after 4 months of the prison and labor hardship in North Korea. At that time, we had to pay 8,000 Chinese yuan to soldier. We swam across again in Tumen River in the city of Busan, and it was dark night, and it was a very challenging moment in my memory.
You eventually came to America, which is remarkable. What had you been told about America, and how did the reality differ?
Since I was repatriated to North Korea, I had a chance to stay in the orphanage shelter for a few times. And then those classes held in orphanage shelter, because I was defector, I was not allowed to listen in the classroom. However, I overheard outside of the classroom. And then they were teaching about the outside of North Korea country, which is South Korea and America. They are telling that America is the greatest enemy of North Korea, and South Korea is the enemy of North Korea because they are listening to America. Growing up, my mom also told me the story about the missionary, because my sister, when she started to go to church in China, my mom didn't agree in the beginning and told us the story that in North Korea, she got education that back in the history, there was American, big nose, tall and white missionary in the North Korea, and they lived in a big and fancy house, and in front of that house fence there was an apple tree, and during fall season there was an apple dropped on the ground, and there's one hungry little North Korean boy crossing by and saw that apple on the floor, so he picked up and he bite that apple, and then that missionary saw that boy and then tied him up on the apple tree and wrote a thief word on his forehead with acid, and then tortured him until he died, and then he still tied up on the apple tree after he died as well. So that's the story. So my mom told us that, American missionaries is the worst person in the world, and that's how we taught, and dangerous. They will kill you and blah, blah. So she was very aggressive at the time. But however, right now she's a strong believer. She completely changed, but that's what she told me in the beginning. And that's the lack of knowledge about the world at the time. So after we come to China, we slowly be able to hear and listen and see those movies and foreign movies about America and South Korea. But before then, only we taught through the government of North Korea is very negative information and negative stories. So after we came to China, we slowly learned, and after we came to after we met the pastor John Yoon, and he was American citizen. So through him, we heard a lot good information, and also he was giving food for us and paying for our rent and all that. So we already know people from America, they are rich and they are good, and Christians, they are kind, and they like to share the love and helping others. So it changed the perspective completely. But after we come to America, the realizing the freedom, it took a little time, but that's a completely changing story after we experience in person.
Grace Jo, you've been through a lot. What would you like people to take? What should they understand from the experience that you've conveyed to us today?
Today, I wish American people, we should appreciate for our life and our freedom and our liberty in America, because North Korean people are not able to enjoy those freedom, like I mentioned earlier. As an American citizen, I think protecting the freedom for our country is so important, because I feel the sense that people in America are also thinking about the socialism system, and they are promoting that system in America. And I feel like that's wrong because people from communist country and socialist country, their commonality is suffering and hunger and dying. So we don't want that happen to America. So that's why I'm traveling to high schools in America, trying to teach them the socialist system is and dictatorship is the worst government system in the world. So we have responsible to protect the freedom in America and also raise awareness and hear more stories about those experiences and firsthand stories from those experienced defectors from those countries so that we can have more clear mind and more awareness to make right choice for our country and help other people in the right way.
Grace Jo, if people would like you to speak before their group or organization, is there a place they can go to be in contact?
Yes, there are organizations called youngvoice.org. That's the program I'm involving, and we are sharing our experiences and stories along the USA. And people are from Cuba, Venezuela, and other countries as well. And we all have similar experiences under the government regime. So they also have wonderful stories. So if you are interested, high school teachers, they can book us through the distantproject.org, and it's totally free for them. And then the organization will pay for our speakers' tickets and travel expenses. So that could be one of the organizations you can reach out to.
I certainly hope that they will. Your story is so important. Grace Jo, thank you for joining us today on the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
That concludes another edition of the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Visit us online at shillingshow.com, where you can directly support this podcast by clicking on the Patreon banner at the top of the page and making a monthly donation. Your support is essential for the continuation of the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Until next time.